Thank you, Jay. So yeah, this third part might get a little more out of most of our wheelhouse, but I argue that this is one of the most important things to consider in AI. Basically, the future of AI looks like it could be radically transformative to the world. And there are two main implications I want to talk about today. Radical transformation on the scale of previous revolutions, thinking agricultural revolution or industrial revolution, and existential risks. And this is something that the AI safety community is very concerned about. Existential risks to humanity, for example, the ability to, the risk of making humans go extinct. I'm gonna talk about why we should care as animal advocates about existential risks to humanity. A little roadmap here. To kind of get us into this conversation, we're going to need to talk about a few kind of foundational ideas. One is called scope sensitivity, basically why we should pay attention to bigger numbers and why it's hard for us to do that, and some of its implications. Two implications we're specifically going to dive into are wild animal suffering, why we should be concerned about this, and long-termism, basically why we should think about animals in the long-term future, thousands of years from now, and how choices we can make today might affect them. Basically, I'm going to give you a preview right off the bat. Why AI matters for the long-term future of animal welfare. It could lock in factory farming, meaning make it impossible to ever get rid of factory farming. It could lock in wild animal suffering, and it could empower the world to transcend both of these forms of animal suffering. So first, let's dive a bit into this idea of scope sensitivity. Basically, helping more is better than helping fewer. If we have to choose between two interventions, we should probably choose the one that helps more animals, more sentient beings. But we're not always super good at doing this. You see here, every second in the world, 10 cows are slaughtered, 47 pigs are slaughtered, and 2,400 chickens are slaughtered every second. So the basic argument is we should view helping chickens over helping cows 240 times more important because of the number of animals. This is not accounting for differences in their levels of sentience, their intensity of pain. These are all factors going in, but as a basic concept, helping more should help is more important. And we aren't always good at actually scaling up how much we care with the scale of the numbers. Part of the reason we're not good at scaling up our caring with the scale of the numbers is that it's really hard to interpret big numbers. Like, our brains are just not set out to comprehend how important it is. When I add 3 zeros onto the end of a number, I probably don't really feel that that's 1,000 times more. And as we scale up, here's the number of animals alive in the world today. This is pretty hard to wrap our heads around. I mean, at least it's really hard for me, you know, and when I see the number of wild birds and wild mammals, I kind of just go like, okay, there's a lot of them. I don't know, like, you tell me. But I think that in reality, this is really, really important information. And it's something that we should be working really, really hard to give ourselves the scaffolding and the tools to actually bake this into our prioritization, because we can't help all animals at once. We have to help some first. So thinking about numbers of animals is really important. One way that we can help ourselves, another tool or scaffolding we can give to kind of get around this problem of our natural human scope insensitivity. You know, we're basically evolved to think in dozens, not in billions, is to use graphs. But as you see, graphs are still pretty hard to interpret. But here's a couple graphs of the previous data. So you see, first we have humans, farm animals, and wild birds. How many of them are there in the world? That's that first chart in the upper left. That's how many humans, farmed animals, and wild birds there are in the world. There's a lot more wild birds than all of the farmed animals in the world combined. The next chart, we add another layer. So we're moving down, we have wild mammals. Okay, I see maybe 2 extra zeros. How much more is that? Oh, now humans is starting to be barely visible on this chart. Wild birds is very, very little compared to wild mammals. Okay, that's important for prioritization. We add the next layer, amphibians and reptiles. We add the next layer, fish. Every single time we add another layer of the total number of animals in the world, another one of these groups, it dwarfs everything that has come before. And this continues. I didn't bother putting all the charts because it's just a lot, but basically I'm saying this is important. And I said one implication is wild animal suffering. This is the number of animals in the world. Another way of visualizing this: green, all the wild animals in the world. Black, all the non-wild animals in the world. So that's all the farmed animals, domestic animals, lab animals. There's a lot more wild animals. And it's not usually something we consider in our prioritization at the scale that we should be considering. This is going to come back up when I talk about the implications of AI in its radical transformation and existential risks. We should care more about wild animals, not just, we should care because there's more of them, but this only really matters if they need our help. If their lives are filled with any kind of suffering that we could go ahead and alleviate. Unfortunately, that probably is the case. Most wild animals suffer in pretty terrible ways, and this isn't intuitive for a lot of us. A lot of us picture nature as this idyllic place where animals are living out their best lives. As was mentioned earlier, many animals will choose to take refuge in a human structure, or basically, dying in the wild is not a pleasant experience, and most animals die young, something we'll get to in a second. But first, the idea that we can do something about wild animal suffering. And this is something that AI will probably be able to help us do. One example is there's an organization called the Screwworm Free Future. One of the founders is actually here with us today. I think this is one of the most impactful animal interventions I know of. There's a wild animal called a screwworm. It is a fly in its adult form, and it's a larva in its larval stage. This animal basically lays its eggs into the open wounds or orifices of larger animals, causing an extremely painful infection that's almost fatal. This affects hundreds of millions of animals per year, and it's extraordinarily painful. And the scale of suffering from this one single species is massive and outsized. Screwworms are not keystone species. If they are removed from an environment, the environment doesn't collapse. They're actually not very ecologically important, but they have a vastly outsized amount of suffering that they produce in the environment. These animals have been eradicated from North America, basically because they have a devastating impact on livestock and on human health when a human gets infected. They have not been eradicated in South America. And Screwworm Free Future is pushing for the eradication of screwworms in South America because of wild animal suffering. Rather than taking the agriculture angle, they're saying we could alleviate a lot of pain to a lot of animals by eradicating screwworms from the wild. And the way that you can do this is fairly painless. Basically, you can create a generation of screwworms whose offspring will not be fertile. So they go live out their natural lives, and they're phased out, and you don't cause a lot of suffering. Another way we can help wild animals at scale is with fertility control. Basically, you see here another thing that's another chart with numbers that are hard to get our minds around. So as you look at this, think about the scope and sensitivity that might come up here. Each layer has 10 times more animals than before, but now we're looking at how many offspring a fertile adult has. So, humans tend to be in the 1 at a time range. Fish can get up to tens of thousands or more. And this is really important to wild animal suffering because for a stable wild population, only 2 offspring can survive to sexual maturity and producing offspring. If more are surviving and reproducing, then the population is going to grow. Fewer, and the population is going to decline. So on average, for each of these groups, for every litter or hatch group, only 2 are going to be surviving to sexual maturity. In a very, very, very simplified model here, that means a lot of suffering because you think of all of those animals that didn't make it. What happened to them? Often, these fish, let's say, or these groups of small mice or of tadpoles, they're often going to be born, hatch, not really have time to experience anything positive in their lives, and then in the case of fish, they're often swallowed alive or starve. So basically, the lives of most animals might be very, very, very short and net negative. Fertility control, just like with those groomers, is a way that we can lower the reproductive rate of these animals down to a population that is more, so that fewer of their offspring are going to be in competition for food or whatever their cause of death is. So they can have a higher % of them that are surviving to adulthood without messing up the environment. And that's one thing that AI might be able to help us. There's a big bottleneck in wild animal suffering interventions on how do we actually know what's going to happen here. Ecosystems are hyper complex. Luckily, AI is pretty good at understanding hyper complex things. So as we move forward into the future and AI gets better, it might be able to help us overcome that bottleneck. Moving away for a second from wild animal suffering, another implication of scope sensitivity: most sentient beings have yet to exist. This chart, I just like it because it's really, really hard for me to really visualize how true this is. So this is just referring to humans. Our world in data hasn't done one of these for animals. I think it'd be really cool if they did. Interestingly, for animals, the past would be a lot bigger than for humans, but every triangle on this chart represents 1 unit of the number of humans alive today, so about 8 billion people. By definition, humanity's present has 1 green triangle. That's how many humans are alive today. We have 14 triangles worth 14 times the number of humans alive today have ever lived in the past. That's how many dead humans there are. If we go on for about another 800,000 years, this is how many humans in this, hypothetical scenario we could see in the future. The implication here is that anything that we can do to nudge the future to being a little bit better or prevent it from being a little bit worse is massively impactful. I mean, just a hugely outsized impact if you can make that future a little better. Because again, if we're trying to be scope sensitive, this is what we should be focusing on. The problem is it's really, really hard to think of solutions or interventions that could negatively or positively affect the world robustly 800,000 years in the future. I mean, there's so much uncertainty. But there are some things that we can feel fairly certain will impact the future positively or negatively. One is extinction of humanity. That pretty much is guaranteed to impact the future, because if humans go extinct, they don't exist in 800,000 years. Another is to impact a technology that is going to stick around for those 800,000 years. And this is where AI starts to come in. We think that AI is likely to be transformative in a lot of ways. So let's get a little intro to why care about AI? Why do we think it's going to be transformative? First, it's progressing fast in economically relevant tasks. I don't know if you all remember when the first models that could draw these pictures came out. I had so much fun playing with them. I was like, it is wild that I can say anything and an AI is going to come up with such a good picture of an otter on a plane. Like, oh, it's so cool, so fun. But it was mostly like, yeah, I'm not going to be putting this on an advertisement or anything. I mean, that's not replacing any artist jobs, right? Artists are here to stay. 3 years later, so that was an otter on an airplane using Wi-Fi, and that's what we were getting. Now we can give a more complex prompt. An otter on an airplane using Wi-Fi on their laptop screen is an image generation software creating an image of another otter on a plane using its own Wi-Fi, and it's just, I mean, wow, that's a good picture. That's a lot better than whatever that going on over there. Things are progressing fast. Of course, there's a lot of jobs that AI can't do. I mean, sure, it can create images. I mean, and that's going to replace some jobs. And, there's got to be a lot of jobs that it's not going to replace, right? Well, one thing that AI is not going to be able to do quite as soon is physical work. It's not going to be able to, in a lab, actually, do fine movements of the Petri dishes or something. We might still need lab technicians for that. But one job that probably is mostly cognitive work and might be replaced on the sooner end by AI is the work that goes into improving AIs. It's a lot of math, it's a lot of coding, and as I'm sure we've all heard, AIs are getting really, really good at coding. If we have AIs that are getting better at improving AIs, what do you think is going to happen? It could lead to a kind of a positive feedback system that leads AI to improve a lot more rapidly than we've been seeing. This leads to a scenario called a capabilities takeoff. We could have a slow takeoff that looks more like the red. That gives us a little more time to adapt as society. Probably not much, but a little more. We could have a fast takeoff where everything seems pretty normal until in a matter of months or weeks or maybe even days, suddenly we just have an absolute breakthrough after breakthrough, and AI, again, has a takeoff. This is where we're really getting into the danger zone because we won't have time to adapt and make sure things are going as we'd like them to. This could lead to what has been called a century in a decade. And this is actually a fairly slow takeoff scenario. This is like, I hope this is all that happens. A century in a decade is this idea that we would get a year, a decade, 100 years worth of technological progress, because as AI takes off, it gets better at R&D in basically all economically relevant areas, and we have history moving really, really fast. What happened in the last decade? If we saw all of the last decade's progress happen in just 10 years, this would be very impactful. We had the electrification of the world. We had the invention of computers, internet, space exploration, modern medicine, genetics, biotech, modern physics, all in the last 100 years. Socially, we've had civil rights, women's rights, the globalization of the world in trade and culture, mass media and communication. So much has happened. Politically, we've seen decolonization, the fall of the European empires, multiple world wars, the rise of the US and China as global powers, the rise of international institutions like the UN. And of course, lots of other stuff. I mean, modern financial systems, credit cards, I like having a credit card, digital payments, massive economic transformation away from agriculture and low quality manufacturing to knowledge-based and services-based economies. I would ask you, have any of those things mattered for animals? Because on their face, none of this has to do with animals, right? I think it's probably the case that almost everything on this list has mattered a lot for animals. I mean, we've seen the rise of factory farming in the last 100 years and all of the systems that support factory farming. What if we'd been able to see all of this coming? What if we had had a robust animal welfare movement 100 years ago that had some idea of the changes that the Industrial Revolution was going to bring, and we're able to see the rise of computing and the rise of all of these things, the power shifts that were going to happen on the world stage? Would we have been able to nudge things in a different direction? This might be the situation that we're in right now with AI. We might be on the brink of all of these type of changes happening a lot faster than they were before. And a lot of this is going to matter for animals. So that's one thing to consider, the radical transformation that AI is going to bring. Then we get into some more specific concerns. This is getting back into those existential risks to humanity that I talked about. If any of you are familiar with the AI safety world and AI governance, there are some serious concerns about existential risk or global catastrophic risks to humanity. For example, a regime, let's say North Korea, could use AI to perfectly monitor its citizens, basically ensuring that it's impossible to topple from within. This would be a lock-in of a stable authoritarian regime. It's called stable authoritarianism. And this is a major threat to human welfare, because most of us don't want to live in a North Korean regime. And if we're seeing more authoritarian countries able to use AI to lock in their regimes, this is really bad for human welfare. What I haven't seen a lot of is discussion about how this is bad for animals. North Korea, factory farms. North Korea does not have a robust animal movement fighting those factory farms or trying to improve welfare on factory farms. If we are seeing the lock-in of bad anti-animal values, this is clearly bad for animals. This could lead, in the worst case scenarios, to the lock-in of factory farming, at least on the unfree parts of the world, indefinitely. That's a pessimistic scenario, but it could get worse. We could see the end of human civilization. I think some of you are probably like, yay, that means the end of factory farming, right? Well, it could. It also could not. But perhaps worse than that, this would lock in wild animal suffering forever. Humans are the only force that we know of in the history of the universe that might end up in a position to reduce wild animal suffering. This image represents the last few minutes of humanity. Nuclear strategists tell us that from the first launch to the end of civilization could be just over an hour. So this would unfold in minutes. And AI could lead to catastrophic risks for humanity, including bioterrorism on a scale and severity that is unseen, reducing the stability of nuclear deterrence through a number of reasons. Our organization ran a couple of war games where we were basically trying to understand what is going to happen in the world with the advent of AGI for animal welfare. And both of our scenarios we ran, unfortunately, ended with a nuclear war scenario. And this is something a lot of strategists are really, really concerned about. AI could bring a decisive strategic advantage to whatever country makes the first breakthrough to AGI, and this could lead to a destabilization of deterrence. So, stable authoritarianism locking in factory farming, end of humanity locking in wild animal suffering, or potentially locking in factory farming by not killing all humans, but making it so that we can never have another industrial revolution. We've already used up all the surface level oil and coal, so that could knock us down and at least extend factory farming for thousands of years, maybe more. The final implication, spreading suffering far and wide, perhaps to other planets. This is a picture of Mars as it progresses to a terraformed state. We're already hearing about this. But notice the green. That means they're building a new atmosphere using probably genetically modified forests. Those forests might be filled with insects or animals. This could spread wild animal suffering throughout the universe. It could lead to deeper or new forms of suffering through biologically engineered organisms that can suffer in different ways. Biocomputing, they've already put human brain cells on computer chips and taught them to play Pong. This is a clear case for a potential suffering that is new on Earth. And there's, of course, concerns about digital suffering, AI suffering. So there's some real ways that this could go badly. Or maybe the positive scenario. Maybe we align AGI to all sentient beings. AI could lead to the rapid end of factory farming. Again, when we're seeing that century in a decade, one technology that might take off is alternative proteins. Maybe it just completely undercuts the economic incentive to factory farm. This AI might be our best chance of eliminating factory farming in the next decade. It seems possible. It could lead to the alleviation of wild animal suffering. Now we can understand ecosystems in a way that we couldn't before, and new biotechnologies that could allow us to get in there and alleviate suffering, at least in its worst forms, or its least the forms that we have the least interest in seeing continued. Just meaningless, horrific suffering in the wild that maybe we could actually finally robustly change and create a flourishing future for all who feel. That idea of spreading humanity throughout the stars, maybe this could come with just high welfare for all sentient beings. I mean, there's a really positive scenario here too, but it takes work. So what can we do about it? As animal advocates, as advocates for the well-being of all sentient beings, what if we'd known the Industrial Revolution was coming? I asked that question before, but seriously, think about it. What if we had seen this coming? Could we have stopped factory farming? If we looked at, oh, they are inventing these neat mechanisms, like that's really cool. There's a lot of industry that can happen here. What if we foresaw, what if they plug animals into this system? And we go around and we tell people, we need to ban this before it starts. Maybe other people would have said, yeah, sure. I mean, that's horrible. Why would anyone do that? Sure, we'll write it down. You can't plug animals into the factories. Sure. Or maybe we could have nudged this more strategically. We could have gotten bans and commitments before things were entrenched, before they had billions of dollars that we could never match and enormous lobbies. Like, it's much harder to make change once things are entrenched and once there's massive industries behind it. Another thing to consider, history is unfolding as we speak. AI is going to create a lot of forks in the road. Some of these may seem unrelated to animal welfare. I warn everybody not to overlook these. One example, Asia is home to most of the world's farmed animals, 90% of farmed fish, 45% of farmed land animals. In the 1940s, what if we had been able to cheaply nudge China towards a more open society instead of a more closed society? Would that have been an effective intervention for animals? Animal welfarists at the time probably wouldn't have thought getting involved in the Chinese Civil War to be important for animals. But now we're in a situation where one of the world's largest factory farmers doesn't allow for a robust animal movement because they're a more closed society. They don't allow the type of activism that's allowed in the West. Maybe that would have been a good intervention for animal welfare in the future. AI is going to create forks in the road like that. Is China going one way or another? It's going to lead to the rise and fall of global powers. It's going to be a major shift. We need to keep our eyes open. We need to have new theories of change, better and deeper world models. So this might mean big shifts for some of us. It might mean trying new strategies, not doing the same thing that we've tried before. Right now, our movement is not ahead on this. We're just not. And that's something that Sentient Futures is trying to change. We want everyone to consider new theories of change that are taking into account the type of transformations that we're going to be seeing here. Consider nth order effects. Changing whether North Korea goes one way or another, or China goes one way or another, will have effects down the road. A new technology will have effects down the road for animals. Consider what happens next, and don't be afraid to look at some of these as things we should get involved with and get active with. As with all revolutions, industrial revolution, agricultural revolution, most people are not ahead of the curve, and we're not there as a movement. So you could be one of the first people or the first organizations to work on this, and that's a great place to be. Instead of being the 10,000th researcher on a topic, you could be the 10th or the first activist to be raising these questions. And that's the thing. Most of these are questions. We don't have answers to all of this yet, but we need to be asking the right questions. And if you look around this room, most of us aren't going to go and do that. So I would really, really implore everyone to take it upon yourself. Get your organization to think about the transformative effects of AI. How is this going to change things? Not just your direct work, but how is the world going to change? Maybe some of what we're working on is soon going to be undercut. Maybe it's not going to have mattered whether things went this way or that way in a certain area, because the entire industry is going to get undercut in an unpredictable way. And perhaps most of all, make things before things get entrenched. I don't want us to end up in another situation where if we had seen this coming, we could have nipped it in the bud. But now, here we all are, fighting the good fight, but it's a hard fight. And maybe it didn't have to be if we had been further ahead and seen this coming. So let's do it before it gets expensive to make the changes we want to see. So recap of what I've talked about. AI is progressing rapidly. It's going to transform the world. It could lead to human extinction, locking in wild animal suffering. It could solve or lock in factory farming. You can impact the way this goes. You can impact the way this goes. You can impact the way this goes. No one else is going to do it. It's up to us to make sure that the advent of transformative AI is in the interest of all sentient beings. And you don't need to be a coder to make a difference. This is a big one. It's one of the first questions I always get asked. You just need to be a dedicated advocate that is AI aware. I basically didn't talk about code in this talk. I talked about all kinds of things that you probably are involved with politics, with social change. There's a lot of ways we can get involved, and you definitely do not have to understand the deep technical stuff. It's good to, upskill there, but you don't have to. Ask the right questions. Like Jay talked about PLF, how is this going to impact our understanding of animal communication? How is this going to impact whether we can understand whether animal welfare is higher or lower? How is this technology going to be used in the short term and in the long term? And be an ethical compass to get in there with the conversations about interspecies communication. Sentient Futures has a hub in San Francisco because we think getting involved with the people developing these technologies is one of the best ways to impact it. They're not very pro-animal and species aware all the time, and maybe you can be someone who understands what they're doing and can nudge them in the right direction. We have to champion animal interests during this transformative time because stuff might get locked in the long term. This is a high stakes challenge, and the risks of inaction are astronomical. So where do we go from here? Jay, you want to tell them about some of the programs that we have?
Yeah, so first, we're running an AI X Animals Fellowship, so if you're interested in the topics that we covered and want to take these discussions further, we welcome you to apply for this. Right after this, in October 9th to 10th, we're holding a conference in New York City just before EAG on the AI Animals and Digital Minds Conference. And right after this session, we have an AI and long-termism meetup, which is at the 12:30 time slot.
I'd love to see you all there.
Okay, thank you very much for this thoughtful and interactive session. We're on time, but if anyone wants to stay for just one question that we have, we can take that. It's coming in. Yes. So if you have we only have time for one question that came in, unfortunately. And it's this one. It seems that AI can be both beneficial and detrimental. It boils down to the intent of people using it for either improving animal welfare or maximizing profit. If there's no regulation, for example, by governments or the EU, no one can control what data is collected, what data is presented, etc. Is there any ongoing legislative work on a national or international level? And are there ways that we can push it or speed it up?
Yes, there is a lot of work on the national and international level in the AI safety community, but a lot of this is not about animals or non-human sentient beings. There's absolutely work. I mean, this is the stuff that keeps like global security experts up at night. Every government has really smart people working on this, but it's usually not taking into account how is this going to impact animals or non-human welfare, or even human welfare in the long term. I mean, that's often not taken very much into account. So I'd say yes, there's a robust community working on this. It's not big enough, and it should be much larger given the challenge, but very few of them think about animals. I would also tell everyone on the way out, so a few of us, if you want to raise your hand, from Sentient Futures, this is a lot of what we work on. We have some cards that you can take and scan and see what we work on, see the programs that are listed up here. You can sign up and join our community. So talk to us on your way out, and we'll all be we're hosting the meetup, the Long-Termism in Animals meetup. So come and talk. We'd love to talk.
Yes. Thank you once again.